Welcome. So today it's Friday, and every Friday it is story time. So welcome to Burr Cash Flow Investors. And as we talk about it today, we're going to talk about we're kind of getting into the Halloween season, and it's about it's kind of the spooky or the worst thing that has ever happened, and a lot of times in real estate, especially if something doesn't work out, we have a tendency to kind of blame the market, blame a lot of the outside factors, blame a lot of things, and we don't really get to the bottom of, okay, if something bad happened, if something I didn't want it to happen, was there a contributing factor? Was there something that I did that made this whole thing happen? So we're not Hispanic RIA, we're Burr Cash Flow Investors, but I think we're having a little bit of a challenge with the TV in the background. So in uh, in that same here.
So it's right. Somebody's in the center.
Check 1 2.
I can see you there. I just need to check the live itself.
Can you check? Hey, Lori, is the live still working? Because it's okay. I think we're okay. All right. So we're back. So I wanted to relate a couple of kind of stories, incidences, whatever you want to call it, and what were the learning lessons learned. So this particular property that we're going to talk about happens to be a property from in Streamwood, right? And this is kind of, when things go sideways, and why do they go sideways? And generally what I've found is things go sideways whenever we try to force things in real estate. So there's a basic concept in real estate, which is that you can't force the market. You have to wait for the market to give you a deal. So let me relate an incident around this. So what that means is this, that does that mean that you just have to wait and not do anything to find deals, to find things to happen? So that's not what I'm saying, that you have to wait. But what you have to do is you have to do activity, but you don't have to force a deal. So I'll give you an example of a couple different examples of what I mean by forcing a deal. So we see this happen all the time, right? People will come to Mastery, people come to 3-day, they're like, oh my God, I'm super excited, Andrew, right? I got so much information, I'm so motivated, I'm gonna make this happen, right? And I do that from time to time. I did that last year with the whole wholesale thing, that I'm like, oh my God, I'm just gonna go for broke, and I force it and force it and force it. A lot of times what happens is, like in racing, in a lot of these things, they say, right? Like smooth is what do they say? No, smooth is slow and slow is fast, or something like that. The whole point is that there has to be a flow with it, right? That you can't just go. I know we think that, oh my God, the more we force it, more we force it, more we force it, we're going to have more. Invariably with investing, what happens is this, and we see this all the time, that people who try to force it artificially try to basically push all the time. What tends to happen with them is, number one, they're going to get burned out, right? Because it's not possible to maintain that side of momentum, to maintain that type of activity without you hitting burnout, right? And this is something that we see all the time. Now, it's easy for me to give you this advice. It's hard to do. Why? Because what is more important is the discipline is more important than suddenly how much you do day one. It's better to do half an hour every single day than it is to go do 4 hours one day. Because what's going to happen is you're going to force things, and you're going to put in a lot of activity, then you're going to feel frustrated, then you're going to try to take deals and try to make something happen when it's not a deal, right? That a lot of times people will pick a donkey, and then they will tell us, well, but yeah, I know it's kind of a donkey, but maybe I can turn it into a horse. No. God didn't give it the genetics, right? It's not the donkey's fault. It's not my fault. I'm just telling you it's a donkey, but yet we want to force it to become a horse. And I'll give you some examples of that. This happens, number one, when you're trying to force something, right? I'm trying to get, or number two, when you have money sitting in the bank and you want to put it to use. Right? I have done this. I'm 100% guilty of it. And I'm going to blame this one on Rahul, but I was a part of it. So I'm not going to, so it's not his, I'm just having fun with it. So this is a property I'll never forget, right? We had a few years ago, we had a couple hundred thousand, few hundred thousand sitting in the bank. At that time, that was a lot of money, a few hundred thousand sitting in the bank, and it's not being used. And we hadn't bought a property. Like every week we were going to auctions, buying a bunch of properties or buying on MLS, blah, blah. And there's ebbs and flows in the market where at certain times you buy a lot more, at other times there are not as many properties. And so the market has to give it to you, right? There's this concept. So what happened was that he's looking, and this would be on one of the online auctions. He's looking at this property, and I had gone to the property, and I was like, man, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And at the same time, Rahul had gone to the property. I wasn't aware of it. And so I was like, it's just not worth it. And at that particular time, this property was like maybe 70,000 or so is what they were asking. The right price to buy this property would have been about 50. And it would keep coming at auction. And every time they would ask more. Now, this one time, Rahul gets into this bidding situation with other people, and he's like, oh my God, I got to have it, right? Because we have too much money sitting in the bank. We're not using it. We need to deploy capital, right? And this becomes a lot of the times this happens to people. And so he buys the property. He calls me. He's like, hey, man, what do you think? I'm like, dude, it's on a busy road in Streamwood, right? It's a bad location. The house is kind of this bi-level, weird little house. The downstairs is not quite downstairs. It's just a weird location, right? It's a bad house, needs a ton of work. There's a lot of water. And for the time being, like today, if you could buy a property in Streamwood for 70, 80,000 bucks, you'd be laughing all the way to the bank, because now the back end value for that house would be like 280, 290. At the time, right? Barely the back end value on that house was, I don't know, like 160, 180, something like that, right? It was just one of those things that things have changed, obviously, over the years. And I remember buying the house, right? And it was occupied property, mind you. Now, it was occupied property. We had talked to the people, but the people had 4 or 5 dogs, and he was just one of those guys who's like, oh, tough guy, F you, you're going to not take me out, only my dead body, that kind of human being, that kind of person, just acts like a badass all the time, right? And it was not a big deal. I mean, he's going to get evicted, but now that would eat up time. So day one, we buy the house. Now it takes 45 days or something for basically to actually close. We close on the property. Now, every single thing that could have happened. So the first thing is you got to get the people out, right? So to get them out, it took about, 4 or 5 months, something like that, right? It took 4 or 5 months to get them out. So that was number one challenge. We knew about that, right? I can't say that we didn't know about it, that this was something that we knew about and we should have built into the price. And this was one of those things, too much money, burning a hole in your pocket, and you force something to happen and you make a mistake, right? And both of when Rahul bought it, I'm like, yeah, man, this is not but it was just, and he realized, he's like, man, I paid too much. Hopefully it's going to work out, blah, blah, right? But now you bought it, so you got to deal with it, right? It's like you made your bed, now you got to sleep in it. So buy the property. It took about 4 or 5 months to get the guy out. Finally, he gets out. When he gets out, it's absolute pigsty. It's an absolute pigsty. And so now, whenever we had looked at the basement, because they were living there and because there was so much stuff, there were a bunch of cracks, right? So now when you empty the whole thing out, now there's a bunch of cracks. Now you have to not only fix all the cracks, but then you have to go get all the permits, get all of this stuff done, right? We're getting all of this stuff done. We've paid too much, so now we're trying to cut corners. Right? Now, as we're cutting corners, the village of Streamwood is getting more and more and more upset with us because they're like, hey, blah, 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 the typical stuff. right? So now we're getting even more and more and more anxious. Then we finally get the property done. Now this is about another 6 or 7 months later, right? Now the delays in the property, I can't blame anybody for it. So number one, buying the property on a busy road, knowing it's a busy road, right? Knowing the property is a little quirky, it's in bad condition, knowing it is occupied. Can I blame the market? No. Whose fault is that? Our fault. Did we have to buy the property? No. What were we doing? We were artificially forcing the deal because why? Because, oh my God, I need to do something. I need to do something. Sometimes it is better to do less deals and be more profitable. Hear me very closely. It is much better to do less deals and be way more profitable than to do more deals and be ultra profitable. It is much easier to make a lot more money doing less deals, but doing the right ones. And this deal was a perfect example. Then we get it done. So now it's about 13 months into the process, right? 12, 13 months. Now we stick the property on the market. And because it's a busy road, because it, and the other thing I forgot, it didn't have a garage. No garage on the house, right? So generally in the suburbs, on a busy road, a house which is kind of quirky, right, had to do all this work, was occupied, has no garage. Guess what, right? The market was not like today. Today, it's very different. Today, any house is selling just because there's no inventory, right? At the time, right, you could not give the house away. And the house sits on the market 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and we're reducing price each and every time, right? Then a buyer comes in finally. Inspection fails. Invariably, this is going to happen on those type of properties because why? Because there are just issues, and there was minor issues. We had fixed everything. It's not like we had done the roof, we did the siding, we did the inside, we did the downstairs, we got the basement done. We had done everything in the house, but it's just like something small comes up and the buyer is not very sure. They get cold feet and boom, they walk out, right? This happened 3 more times on that same property. Finally, we get a buyer. Property goes under contract, and at that point, we get another inspection, and there is a tank in kind of this cubby hole in the basement that we had seen. So there's a basement, there's a sub basement over there, and we get that tank out. Then we go in the yard, and there are 2 pipes sticking out in the yard, right? 2 little pipes like that. Guess what they were? They were vent pipes. There was another oil tank in the backyard, right? And by the time we were all said and done, we bought the property, I don't know, 60, 65, I don't know, maybe $70,000, whatever it was. And we ended up selling the property, whatever we sold it for, $180,000, $185,000, whatever that price was. And actually, the person who sold the property happens to be Pablo. Right? Pablo Sarmiento, Ms. Gina's husband. It happens to be Pablo's client bought that particular property. At the time, obviously, I had no idea who Pablo was, but it was Pablo's client that bought that particular property. Now, I can look back and say, oh, it was the market that we didn't make any money. And we probably, till this day, honestly, Rahul and I have not done the numbers on that property. Right? Real honest numbers as to did we really even make money or did we, not make money on the deal? And the reason I'm saying that is, guys, listen, this is reality. If you run a business, I don't care who you are, you're going to have some failures. Obviously, you need to have much more successes than failures. Otherwise, you're going to be out of business, right? But I mean, there's another 3-flat in Brookfield that we own. I mean, it's a stunning 3-flat. Stunning, right? At the time when we bought it, we put a 3-unit building, middle of Brookfield, the entire thing, right? Today, on the top floor, we get $2,000 in rent, right? $2,100. On the middle floor, we get $1,900. On the basement floor, I think we get $1,500 or $1,600. So if you add up those rents, I mean, you get close to $5,500, $6,000 almost in rents. And it's set up at a 30-year mortgage, low payments. And payments is like $1,700. But at the time when I bought it, I still remember that It was another one of those like online auction type of properties. And literally when I bought it, nobody could get in. I kept calling the agent, calling. Finally, he lets me in, right? I buy the property. Taxes were super high at the time. And I'd paid 140 for the property. And at that time, like today, it seems like a joke, right? Because we just had an updated appraisal done for some other purposes, and the appraisal is at $550,000 on that property today. At the time, we had bought it for 140, and I will never forget this. Miss Mary had done the loan on that particular property, and literally, my budget on the property was $56,000. We ended up spending close to $120,000 on that house, right? On the 3-flat. Now, the only reason why it made sense in the end was because the appraisal at that time was $350,000, mind you. $350 appraisal at that particular time was a very high appraisal, right? And what I'm trying to say is this, right? That particular property, we had bought it correctly. We're done. Now, rehab was just a lot of rehab because such a big property. Brookville took us to town. In that particular property, did I buy it fairly good? Yes. Was the rehab a little bit out of control? Yes. But there were certain things that just happened, like the back wall collapse, retaining wall, certain things happened that no control over it. But knowingly, I had not made a mistake. On the first example that I gave you, I had made or in this case, I'm blaming Rahul because Rahul's the one who bid on it. But yet, there's another example. There's another property that Rahul bought, actually around maybe a couple of years later. And this was a property. I go to it. I tell him, hey, man, this property on the MLS, it's coming up at auction. Don't buy it, dude. Don't buy it, right? It's horrible. It's ugly looking house, right? And it's one of the Streamwood Boulevard. It's on one of the main boulevards in Streamwood. And he's like, all right, no problem. And then I don't get up early in the morning. So the auction is happening. And this was one of the online type of auctions, I believe. Or no, it came up to auction. Came up to actually regular auction, Cook County auction. And that's the same property he bids on, right? I could have bought this particular property in the MLS at that time for, I don't know, $50,000 or something like that. He buys it at the Cook County auction. Fortunately, property was vacant. He buys the property at the Cook County auction for, I think, $45,000 or $47,000, right? Fairly close to what it was. Needed a new garage, needed a whole new driveway. In Streamwood, the deal is that if basically your floors are cracked, right, if they're badly cracked, you have to put a new garage because they won't let you get an occupancy certificate in Streamwood. And if you do take down a garage, in most towns, if you take down a garage and it's a 2-car garage, then you basically can just take it down and have no garage. In Streamwood, there's an ordinance that says if you take down a garage, because you have to, because there's no foundation, right? Those properties were not built, the house was built on a foundation, but there was no foundation on the garage. There was just a slab they would pour on the ground. Over the time, it would basically crack. Then you have to put a new garage in. And I'll never forget this particular garage, Danley Garages did the garage for us. At the time, I paid $9,700 for this garage. Today, the same garage would be $15,000, $16,000. But at the time, $9,700, right? And now this property was bought incredibly cheap. Even at that time, it was bought incredibly cheap. But it needed a heck of a lot of work. And now, because it was bought incredibly cheap, we ended up getting the work done. One of our guys at the time, one of the rehab guys, ended up occupying the property. This was the saving grace, mind you. He moved in it with cheap rent, and he's like, man, you guys just supply the material. Over time, if you guys get the garage done, I will get the interior completely done. Now, this guy was not the best at paying rent, but to his credit, he did get the interior done really, really nicely, right? That was a property that if we had done it and we had put at the time, now we have kept the property, right? So all in cost, purchase plus rehab cost, plus the garage, whatever, probably at that time was 110. But then at that time, the property was probably only worth 135, 140. Today, that same silly house, right? We kept it, we rented it out. I think the mortgage, probably we owe a $30,000, $35,000 mortgage on it. And now the property's worth $260, 270, whatever that property's worth. I haven't even been to it for years, right? And the moral of that particular story being is that a lot of times I see that happen all the time, right? People from Mastery will call me. They're like, Andrew, I know at the 3-day you told us that our job is to check with you, right? Because in Mastery, we want, before you buy a house, we want you to check with us. Hey, does this make sense? Am I looking at the right numbers? Am I paying the right price? We're supposed to be your backstop, meaning we're going to teach you exactly what to do. You're going to go out there, execute, but before you make a decision, yes, I'm going to buy this property, we have a second pair of eyes so that you don't make a mistake or you get stuck somewhere, you're supposed to pick up the phone, call us. A lot of times people will pay all this money, come to Mastery, and I'm like, hey man, listen, don't buy the house. There's one going on right now as I speak. I tell this person, do not buy this property. I mean, I couldn't be more clear. Well, why? I'm like, listen, the margin is not there. The property is screwed up. That particular town that I'm talking about is very tough to do rehabs in. This is a wholesale that is being done from somebody in Mastery. And there's another wholesaler in between. And not that I mind that there's another wholesaler in between, but that wholesaler is the original wholesaler is making 10. The wholesaler in between is making a $20,000 spread. And then this person is buying the property. So if I'm trying to get this person to dump the property 30,000 lower because I think that's the best thing to do for him, then does it make any sense for anybody in Mastery to buy the property 30,000 higher? Makes no sense. But this person, nice person, I like the person, I can't convince them not to buy the property. And I'm bringing it up because I'm passionate about it. I believe in it. I don't want somebody, and this person's not going to lose money, mind you. They're not going to lose money, but I guarantee you, they're not going to make much money either. And that particular town is going to give them hell and time back in terms of getting the property done, right? But what do I do? My job is to tell them. My job is to be honest with them. My job is to say, hey, please, my brother, don't do it. But it's a grown adult. If they choose to do it, there's nothing I can do. Now, has there been times where maybe people suggested, maybe you don't want to do that, Andrew? It doesn't probably make sense. And have I done things? Yes, right? We all do it. I don't want this person to lose money because that's obviously, we never want that out of Mastery. But I think for the amount of time, effort, and the headache this person is going to spend in this property, I don't think on the back end, they're really going to make any money with it, right? That's just my take on it. So hopefully, that makes some sense. A lot of times, whenever I share the stories, like whenever I'm talking about this particular person with Mastery, it's not because I'm trying to put them down. It's because, guys, listen, it is, to do things right in real estate is hard. It's not easy to do everything right. And a lot of times we don't see because we're so close, we're in the picture. And so we're not standing far away enough to be able to see the frame. And that's why I bring these things up, because our job is hopefully to talk you out of doing crazy things that you are doing. And a lot of times, right, even if I'm so close to the situation, sometimes I don't see it. That's why we need a mentor, we need coaches, we need other people that can see a bigger picture. It may not be necessarily more smart than you, but they can see a larger picture and go, hey man, I know you really want to do it, but this is not something you should be doing. You should be looking for better deals outside, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Today we were supposed to be doing the drawing for everybody from Chicago Build. I'm sorry? No. We were supposed to do it today, but we're going to do it on Monday. Yeah, we were supposed to do it today. We're doing it from Monday because we had like thousands of those business cards that were submitted. So we just haven't had a chance to go through and get them all entered in. That way we have that so that we don't miss anybody. So we're going to do that drawing on Monday. And if you win, it was supposed to be the romance of the rolls. So we're going to send the rolls with a chauffeur for you and a nice dinner for two somewhere downtown. So hopefully whoever wins it will enjoy it with your spouse, with your significant other, whoever you choose to take. So having said that, it's Friday, guys. Have a safe, nice weekend, and we will talk to you on Monday.